I'm Dr. Rahman, and welcome to Black Women's Health. Okay, let's get going. Welcome to Black Women's Health. I'm Dr. Rahman, and I have the esteemed pleasure of being able to speak with a renowned cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Neravetla. How are you, doctor?
Good morning, Dr. Rahman. How are you? Thank you for
I'm well.
inviting to this meeting.
Yeah, we're coming together to talk about a very interesting topic, salt. I think I first learned about you when I went to the PPOD conference in Newark, New Jersey. And PPOD is prevention, plant-based prevention of disease conference that was held about 2 months ago in Newark, New Jersey.
Yes, indeed.
And at that time, someone gave me a postcard with your name on it.
Okay.
And the thing about the postcard that really attracted my attention was there was a quote from the comedian Dave Chapelle.
Yes.
And the quote said, "The number one killer of Black Americans is table salt."
Yes.
And that's what gave me a pause. And that's what prompted me to find you and to hear about the work that you've been doing.
Thank you for seeking me out. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, if you would, doctor, could you share a little about your medical background and training?
So I came to the United States in mid-70s, and I came with the training of a medical school back in India. So I still haven't lost all my accent, as you can tell, but quite a bit different than what I came with. So in 76, I came to Brooklyn, New York, and trained a general surgeon, a 5-year-long program. And then I went on to train cardiothoracic surgery, University of Cincinnati. And I'm currently practicing in Dayton, Springfield area, cardiac, thoracic, and vascular surgery. And it's been exactly 40 years plus since I did my first cardiac surgery in private practice. So I've been doing that long, cardiac, vascular, and thoracic surgery.
So for those of us that may not know, what does a typical day look like for you?
Yes, most common surgery we do is coronary artery bypass surgery, CABG, as we often refer to, is meant for somebody who has blocked arteries of the heart, gets heart attacks or angina, and we build bypasses by opening the chest. Very grotesque operation, if I might say. That's the most common operation I do. And a typical day, I would have done one of those at least, and maybe a vascular case where we build a bypass in the leg or clean up the artery in the neck, called a carotid endarterectomy. We clean up the artery that's blocked in the neck that causes strokes, and someday and possibly do a lung resection for somebody with lung cancer. So those are the variety of. So I'm a old-timer surgeon, as you can tell, and we do a large breadth of different procedures as we are trained, compared to some of the newer ones who are much more focused on one area or the other.
Okay. That sounds very, very impressive. And along the way, you've also become an author.
Yes. Like I said, I was doing this for 40 plus years. And for the first 25 years, I was busy developing skills and expanding my practice and getting good at what I was doing until a light bulb went off about 15 years ago. And the light bulb went, and I suddenly realized every single thing I'm doing every single day is totally preventable.
Mm.
And the most important information I can share with the patient and people in general is not how I can do this surgery, but how to prevent this surgery. So it took me 25 years to get to that point. And along the way, I stumbled upon, literally serendipitous, that the most widely ignored cause of our health problems, specifically heart disease, is table salt.
Now, and I have to stop you because that sounds like an exaggeration.
It does, right off the bat. That's why I embarked on this mission to make this a day-to-day knowledge. So our mission, Salt Kills, is what we started about 15 years ago, is to raise awareness of the dangers of the table salt. Specifically to your point, because most people don't realize it. Most widely ignored cause of health problems. That is the intent of our mission, and that's how we became an author. Not to write another paper based on Yale, Harvard, or anything like that, but to explain the research from premier institutions like Yale, Harvard, and so on and so forth, as well as many healthcare agencies, including CDC, WHO, American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, and so on and so forth. What are they saying and why we are not listening? So my authorship is simplifying that information using illustrations, using analogies, so that you see it happening to you. And that's how I became an author.
So you're saying table salt leads to heart disease.
Yes.
How does that happen?
So high blood pressure, first of all, is stepping back a little bit. High blood pressure is the number one health problem in the world. Number one. 1.2 billion people with hypertension.
And doctor, how do we define high blood pressure?
So traditionally we define, I have an issue with that as well. Anything over 120 or 80, 120 is the top number, 80 is the bottom number, systolic, diastolic, we define that as high blood pressure. Anything over that.
Let me stop you because we've heard different numbers. Initially, we were hearing 140 over 90. Then
so 140 over
130 over 80.
So
and I'm hearing you say 120 over, what's that, 70?
80.
120 over 80.
Yes. So American Heart Association, American Cardiology have seated what is called joint national conferences several times. We are in JNC 8 right now. That's how many times they met to define what high blood pressure is, what the numbers are. The most recent definition is anything over 120 by 80 is hypertension. And anything over 140 or 90 needs to be treated pharmaceutical. So you have between 120, a top number, to 140, and the bottom number 80 to 90, little flex where you have to aggressively change your lifestyle to bring it back to 120 or 80.
So, doctor, what do those two numbers represent?
The systolic blood pressure when the heart pumps is the top number, when the heart actually squeezes. And when the heart relaxes is the bottom number, diastolic. Systole is when the heart squeezes, diastole when the heart relaxes. So top number and bottom.
So I would think if my blood pressure was high, that means that my heart is strong because it can pump.
Yes, so very interesting that you pointed out. That is where the danger lies of high blood pressure. And going back to the numbers real quick, 1.2 billion people with high blood pressure, over 100 million Americans with high blood pressure, and over 60 to 70, depending on who you look at, nearly 70% of Black Americans have high blood pressure, a kind of high blood pressure that is described in many different ways, more aggressive high blood pressure. If you're a gynecologist, you know cancers of different aggressiveness. So there are not so aggressive versus poorly differentiated, well differentiated, like that. The Black American high blood pressure is the most aggressive variety of high blood pressure that we know of. Anyway, going back to your question, 120 over 80 or below is normal. 120 and above is high blood pressure. We have to take account of that. And if you think your heart is pumping, your pressure is high, your heart is working better, is exactly the opposite of what really happens. The pressure is high, it is exerting resistance against pumping of the heart. In fact, if the blood pressure is high, that means the heart has to pump harder. If the pressure is high, the heart has to pump harder to get the blood through. So that is actually defines what high blood pressure is. High blood pressure is a condition where the heart is pumping 24/7, every second, asleep, walking, whatever you're pumping, the arteries are receiving the blood. When the heart pumps, the artery is supposed to relax to receive the blood each time, each and every time. So there's a coordinated movement between the heart and the blood vessels. Every time the heart pumps, the artery relaxes a little bit. Heart pumps, heart relaxes. I repeat this all the time to get the rhythm of it. You're going like it dances with the stars. You move forwards, you move backwards. The partner moves backwards. The partner moves forwards, you move backwards. It's a synchronous, divine, whatever you want to call it, fantastic movement that happens constantly in our body. But high blood pressure means the heart is pumping, the artery says, I can't relax enough. I'm pumping, the heart artery says, my relaxation can't do as much as I'm supposed to. The artery is offering resistance against the pumping action of the heart. So when the blood pressure goes up, that means you have lost the capacity of your arteries to relax as they're supposed to. When you look at it that way, high blood pressure doesn't look like a simple thing that I can take a pill for. High blood pressure is a deadly, dangerous condition called a silent killer, wherein your arteries do not relax the way they are intended to.
And so that means that the heart has to pump harder to get the blood through.
So this is instead of a divine dance, you created a battle between the heart and the blood pressure, heart and the arteries. Heart and the arteries are fighting with each other. They are fighting with each other. This is a fight. There's no winners. Everybody loses. The heart loses by getting bigger and bigger and thicker and thicker. Enlarged heart. Enlarged heart. Enlarged heart by itself may sound like, oh, I got a big heart. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, philosophically, it's a good thing to have a big heart. But literally, if you have a big heart, in a short order, it's going to fail. It's kind of a failure that's so common in Black America. It's called a diastolic heart failure, wherein the heart still pumps, but cannot relax enough. So if you're not relaxed enough, you cannot pump enough as well. So this is diastolic heart failure. And to dramatize this point, how bad it is, a 50-year-old black man, is 20 times more likely than a Caucasian to come to the hospital in heart failure.
Okay, let's step back again. What do you mean by saying that Black Americans have aggressive high blood pressure?
Yes. So I am probably closer to Black America as an Indian descent, but I'm not a good example. But let's say I was a Caucasian. So my blood pressure may be 140 or 90 or 160 over 100, something like that. I take one or two pills, one pill. Very soon will be two pills, very soon will be three pills, by the way. That's a different story altogether. High blood pressure is a disease that is permanent. You become from a person to a patient. It becomes is never-ending line of pills. But so if I take one or two pills, blood pressure comes under control. In Black America, the blood pressure right off the bat is much higher. 180 over 100, for example, 180 over 110, which is called type 2 high blood pressure, is 8 times more common in Black America. So the more severe, so 180 in that range is much more common Black America and doesn't come under control with one or two medications.
Mm.
Takes higher doses of more medications. So Black America high blood pressure affects at a younger age, takes a lot more medication to control. The complications from high blood pressure happen much more frequently. If
Okay.
you combine all those three, we call it a malignant disease.
A malignant disease.
Yes.
Okay. So how does table salt contribute to all of this?
Good question. So there is traditionally high blood pressure, the causation has been described as table salt is like a sponge, retains water.
Mm.
You know that by the first line of treatment for high blood pressure and heart failure is a diuretic.
Mm-hmm.
Trying
The
to get rid
water
of
pill.
the
The water
water,
pill.
the water
Yes.
pill. You're trying to get rid of excess water. Why? Because you retained excess water. Why do you retain excess water? Because the salt retains excess water. That is a primary pathology that is described, but it's a lot more complex than that. But for simple understanding, that's the most important pathway. Number two pathway is the arteries have taking salt even one time creates a spasm of the arteries. Even within 30 minutes, there's a study done next door to you in Philadelphia from Delaware, just healthy volunteers. They give them a salty diet and measure the blood pressure and the arms. Within 30 minutes, there's a reduction of approximately 30% elastic capability of the arteries. Elastic capability of the arteries is reduced very quickly. Now, how do you know that? Now, we give water pill. And what else do we give for high blood pressure? So there's a long list of medications,
Mm-hmm.
different pathways,
Mm-hmm.
beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, ganglion blockers, calcium channel blockers. There's so many varieties of them. All of them do only one thing. They make the wall of the artery relax. Different pathways. So treatment of high blood pressure pharmaceutically consists of reducing the volume, water pill, and relaxing the arteries. So by that, you know that you lost, there are two things went wrong. You're retaining water and your arteries don't relax the way they're supposed to.
And so as a result of ingesting salt,
Yes.
the heart works stronger, the arteries don't relax, and this leads to high blood pressure, aggressive high blood pressure, and ultimately heart failure.
Yeah, heart failure when the heart is not pumping, not relaxing. That's a kind of a heart failure which is recognized more and more. By the way, diastolic heart failure on average has worse prognosis than cancers.
Well, yeah,
I said that right.
cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in this country.
No, but somebody says you have diastolic heart failure grade 2 or 3, the outlook is just as bad as having a cancer.
Mm.
Anyway, I distracted.
And so the treatment is to reduce the high blood pressure and to prevent heart failure.
Well, my goal is actually to prevent high blood pressure. We need to look at high blood pressure as a preventable disease. Next comes a therapeutic level. Next is how do we reduce the blood pressure by natural means, by cutting back salt and doing more exercise, etc. And that's the conference that you and I went to.
Yes.
But there's a step before that.
Question, does the salt contribute to any other type of medical problems? I mean, high blood pressure and heart disease, that's a big one. Are there any other medical problems associated with salt?
Yes, there's absolutely there's a long list of them, as a matter of fact. One of my osteoporosis, for example, affects most women. And unfortunately, women have been brainwashed into thinking that eating cheese will prevent osteoporosis. And I'm here to tell you, cheese is the reason why you get osteoporosis. Cheese is the reason why you get osteoporosis. Why? Because cheese doesn't come without salt.
That's right. That's one of the medical complications that you do not hear associated with salt.
Yes.
High blood pressure, heart disease, we've all heard it. But osteoporosis, we tend to think it's a problem of not enough calcium.
No, it's a problem of losing more calcium than you can afford. So this is one of the problem that is a very broad based, and osteoporosis is not a benign disease, as you know. It's a very painful and deadly condition that affects very large area population, especially women postmenopausal. You know that. So let me, if you indulge, I'll explain to you why eating salt causes osteoporosis, if you're
Sure.
interested, in a simple way. So when you eat salt, it's the job of the kidney to get rid of the excess salt. Kidney's job is to maintain this equilibrium. No matter what you eat, you have to adjust by excreting certain things, retaining certain things to maintain a balance. So if you eat salt more than your kidney's capability to handle, the kidney has to get rid of them. And the kidney gets rid of the salt, unfortunately, by opening a pathway, if you want to call it a door, opens a door for the excess salt to leave. Unfortunately, the same door, calcium also leaves. So the more salt you eat, more cheese you eat, more calcium you actually lose. So let me illustrate in a very simpler way. Let's say now it is December already, it's getting cold. And let's say you're sitting at home with a temperature of 0 degrees on a winter Saturday morning, and you invited a bunch of your friends. And it's noontime, you decided to treat them for a lunch, you're in the kitchen, and you're cooking, let's say, fish, okay? And you got into a heated argument about something, you forgot that fish was cooking. And it got burned, and the entire kitchen is filled with smoke and fishy smell, right? Just follow along with me. And then what would you do to get rid of that? The fishy smell and smoke. What would you do to get rid of it?
I'm opening the doors. I'm trying to let the smell out.
Right. You're opening the door or the window.
Windows, yes.
Yes. I just got through telling you that outside temperature is 0 degrees. So what happens when you open the door or the window?
The cold air will come in.
Right. So your intention of opening the door was to lose the smoke and fishy smell. But unfortunately, through the same door, your heating system also goes away. And unless you close the door, you can crank up your thermostat as high as you want, or turn the fan as high as you want, the room remains cold. In the same way, when you keep eating salty things, the kidney, trying to dispense this excess salt, will open a door, so to speak, through which calcium is gone. So you're walking around with a hole in your pocket, and you're putting change into it, coins into it, and you're left with nothing. You got to close the hole.
So it's interesting. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking that with various diseases, we have different personas associated with varying diseases. And osteoporosis is not one of the diseases that we often associate with Black women. When we think osteoporosis, we think thin, frail, white woman, which is a very interesting divergence from what you're saying. Also,
no,
it's
it is
clear.
unfortunately not my opinion. It is documented well in the
Oh yeah,
literature.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just thinking that we don't associate certain medical conditions with certain groups of people, and therefore we would never consider it to be a problem because we think of thin, white, frail white woman, osteoporosis. We don't necessarily think that a Black woman might be at a comparable or maybe even a greater risk.
Yes,
she's because of salt intake.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned clearly salt is related to renal disease.
Yes.
And renal failure is a huge problem
in Black America, especially Black. So I read this book. I don't know if you can see this.
Salt, Black America's Silent Killer. Yes.
Yes. So this is my second book. And the first book, is Salt Kills. Very simple. So anyway, in that second book, I wrote about the exact questions that you raised, osteoporosis and dialysis in Black America.
So
And
there
so,
were two other things. I didn't mean to cut you off,
no,
doctor.
no, go ahead,
There were
please.
two other things I think you mentioned in your book, and I wish you would touch on it.
Yeah.
One is the incidence of stomach cancer
Yes.
as a result of salt,
Yes.
and the other is asthma.
Yes. So I can go in whichever order. First of all, asthma. As just so we talked about salt as like a sponge and retains water. So a study done from Indiana University has shown that asthmatic attacks, it may not actually cause asthma itself. There is some data now arising showing that salt affects your autoimmune system. But more, in acute setting, the likelihood of you suffering a asthmatic attacks are still deadly, especially in Back America. The likelihood of getting an asthmatic attack goes up in proportion to your salt intake.
Now, why
Same
is that? Can you explain the
the more
pathophysiology?
salt you consume, more likely you have an acute asthmatic attack. In the same way, water retention, the breathing passages get swollen and breathing passages get choked, and you have asthmatic attack. So that is the pathway, retention of water. And in a direct proportion to the amount of salt you eat. More salt you eat, more likely, if you already have asthma, let us say, the chances of you having asthmatic attack, acute asthmatic attack, go up in proportion to salt intake.
That's very interesting. I don't think I've ever read about that association. I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying, I don't think I've ever seen that association before.
So going to stomach cancer, there are 30 plus populations in the world. Stomach cancer is the number one killer. Number one cancer killer, I should say. And very common. So they eat very salty food. And the more salt you eat, the pH and the H. pylori, which is responsible for precancerous condition, it thrives. H. pylori is a bacteria that we thought was incidental. Now we find out it is the one that causes ulcers and cancers down the road. It thrives in salty environment. More salty, more they multiply. And by the way, incidentally, more recent data with the autoimmune diseases and resistance infections, salt also promotes urinary tract infection. That's something used a lot. UTI. So the bacteria like to thrive in salty environment. And bacteria also, the salty environment also, the lymphatic cells that are defense cells that fight infections also don't grow as well. So it's a double whammy. The bacteria like to grow, the defense mechanism is going the other way.
Okay. I get the picture. Salt is not good. But question, don't we need salt?
Yes. No. Yes and
Yes
no.
and no?
We need sodium. We need sodium. And we need very little bit of it. And we cannot eat food without sodium. Anything that you eat, virtually anything that you eat, has sodium in it. And we need that sodium. We don't need the salt to meet our sodium requirements.
So now you're confusing me. What's the difference between sodium and salt?
So salt is sodium chloride that comes in a can and a salt shaker and all that.
Mm-hmm.
That is sodium chloride.
Mm-hmm.
Sodium, that is, let's say you eat almonds, there is some sodium in there. That sodium is not sodium chloride. Let's say you eat some cereal, there's some sodium in that. That sodium is not sodium chloride. The sodium requirement for human beings is very small. American Heart Association says there is no requirement of sodium for salt to meet sodium requirements for human beings. American Heart Association says stay under 1500 milligrams is a speed limit, like don't exceed limit. People confuse saying that I need 1500 milligrams or 2000 milligrams, whatever number that is. No organization has said you need 2000 milligrams or 2300 milligrams or 1500 milligrams, depending on the organization.
Oh,
Nobody
now
said,
I'm really confused.
yes,
Let's stop,
this is,
because when you look on the labeling of any
yes,
food,
yes,
there's a nutritional description of the food,
yes,
which tells you how much of your daily, the percentage of the daily allowance that
yes,
you're getting. And it
yes,
has sodium.
right.
And
That
so
is,
if there isn't a limit, if you don't need it, why would it be there?
I'm against that label. That's a mislabeling. That's a tricking you into thinking that you need sodium. That is not correct. So, whereas all other elements that you spoke about, you need, and what percentage of your need is met by that particular food item. When it
So to
comes to
be
sodium,
clear, you're saying that we do not need a daily minimal allowance of sodium,
no, no, salt,
salt.
no. So when American Heart Association says 1500 milligrams, let's take that example. American Heart Association is saying do not stay below 1500 milligrams. The lower, the better. Zero is the best number. But you cannot
Sorry,
avoid eating sodium. You cannot avoid eating sodium. Anything that you eat, you're going to have sodium.
when we're talking
Table
about
salt.
these minimum allowance, we're talking about sodium or sodium chloride.
So the labeling is deliberately confusing by the industry to make you believe sodium, some salt that they added is necessary for you, which is incorrect. And they are trying to say that there's a split between the when it comes to, let's say, potassium and you or some other element, and the recommended daily allowance, RDA, okay, is it says it meets 20% of recommended daily allowance.
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to sodium, it is meeting 20% of the limit of how much you're supposed to eat. Is the opposite. So
Well,
that is very confusing.
it
It's
is
like,
very confusing because even the maximum allowable
yeah,
differs depending on who you're talking to. I believe the FDA says um, the maximum allowable is 2,300
yeah,
milligrams. But they say that people in general eat more than that in their
oh, way
daily.
more than that, way more than that.
Yeah.
So the range of a limit, I would not say recommended allowance. That's the wrong term to use.
Mm-hmm.
The range of limit that has been stated, the most liberal number is 2300 milligrams, that is said.
Right.
Most conservative number is 1500 milligrams by American Heart Association. So all other organizations fall in between that. Okay.
Right. And the
But
reality is that we're eating a lot more
oh,
than
way more than
maximum.
it is very important to emphasize that this is not an you need this number. It is a number that you do not exceed. This is don't exceed this number. Whereas all other numbers that you come across in with regards to nutrition are you need that number, try to meet that number. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the opposite. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
try to meet your vitamin C requirement, you want to try to meet the vitamin B12 requirement, you want to try to meet the folate requirement.
But not the
In here,
sodium.
in here opposite. So I have a serious problem with this labeling.
Okay.
Very serious. You should too. And Black America should rise and oppose this. Because
Now,
what's
what's interesting is that even though these numbers fluctuate, it's even hard to wrap your mind around, well, how much is 2,300 milligrams of salt? And that's like the equivalent of a teaspoon.
that's
That's
already too much. But anyway,
so, I
yeah,
mean,
that's a good.
if you think of it that way,
Mhm.
people can start to appreciate when they're seasoning their food,
Mhm.
when they're at their table adding salt, they can get a sense of how much sodium they're actually ingesting compared to
Yeah.
what's being recommended.
Not allowed. What's allowed?
What is
We
allowed?
like to use the word allowed
Okay, all
versus
right, I got
recommended
you.
for other things. That way we are separating two things. With regards to salt, we are going to use the word allowed.
Got you.
When
All
with
right. So,
regards to B12, for example, recommended. You need that much.
So back to the question is, could we get the sodium that we needed without adding salt at all?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. There are rare exceptions, like you have a salt losing nephropathy or some other disease that makes you lose excess salt, which is an extremely small minority of people. Vast majority of the people on this globe do not need to add sodium chloride, that table salt, to meet their sodium requirement at all. This is a statement by American Heart Association, not me. I'm just trying to let it be known.
All right, so this becomes very interesting. We
Yeah.
don't need sodium chloride added to our food
At all.
to get enough sodium. So the question is, why is salt being added to our food?
To make you eat more.
To make you
Number one reason.
more. Explain that, please.
So you eat potato chips or peanuts, unsalted, you eat a certain amount, you're full. You can't eat more than that. But when I salt them, potato chips, you don't stop eating. You just keep on going. It takes away your stop sign in the brain that says you had enough. Salted peanuts, you just keep on eating. The portion size keeps on growing. The reason the processing industry doesn't care about this is they want to sell more product. As simple as that.
Yeah, it gets worse and worse the more you learn about it, because we know that most of our sodium chloride, which we don't need, comes from fast foods, packaged foods, ultra processed foods.
100%. 80% of the excess salt we are consuming comes from things that you just mentioned. Only 15-20% are you yourself adding during preparation.
So even if I was trying to reduce my sodium chloride intake, as long as I'm eating packaged foods and processed foods, I am probably going to get too much sodium chloride.
Correct. Unless the processing industry changes. For example, processing industry managed to convince people that sugar is bad, so you should eat low-calorie food. Okay, so the reason why they did that, because they had another product ready. They thousands of low-calorie products. They already ready. They wanted to create a market for that, so they advertise against themselves. On the front door, they sell full-blooded whatever product. On the back door, they sell low-calorie product. Okay, they double their margin. Okay, so, but they don't want to say we have a low salt product, because that will reduce their sales. And they don't have an alternative. So processing industry fighting tooth and nail against any legislation we are way behind many countries. If you go to Canada, for example, there is regulations on how much salt you can put on cheese. You can buy low salt cheeses. 100+ countries in the world have regulations on how much salt you can put in bread. In America, we have nothing. It's a free for all.
That's very interesting, because I think the FDA has encouraged the food industry to reduce the sodium that they put in their packaged foods. They're not making it mandatory. They've just asked them to politely to reduce the sodium. And they are going to observe the changes that are made.
Nothing. So for every one change they make, they take one change of salt they make, they take 2 steps to increase the salt. So it's a losing proposition. For example, the sea salt industry, okay? I don't know if it's occurred to you or not, but sea salt is same as salt. And sea salt is 100% same as salt with regards to its damaging effect. And number 2, the special elements that are there in the sea salt, first of all, they are minuscule, and that's not how your body gets them anyway, okay? So, but everybody is brainwashed into thinking.
You're tearing down all of my illusions here.
Well, I'm happy to do that. So this is a subliminal propaganda by processing industry to make you believe sea salt is good for you without actually using this word. Just think how clever it is. Anybody you ask, is sea salt good for you? Oh yeah, Himalayan salt is good, or Celtic salt is good. Where did you hear that? I heard somewhere. Did you read somewhere it's good for you? No, I did. You have access to information at your fingertip. Did you ever bother to check? Did you check PubMed or NIH or any Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, John Hopkins, anybody of authority to say Himalayan salt is better than the sea salt, regular salt for you? Himalayan salt is good for you, or any sea salt good for you? No, not a single medical agency has ever said sea salt is good for you. But if the propaganda is very subtle. If you go to a grocery store, you see these things now made with sea salt. That is the name of the campaign, by the way. Now made with sea salt. They brainwashed 300 million people into thinking sea salt is good for you.
Well, now there's another alternative. It's called low salt. It's potassium.
It's potassium salt.
What are your thoughts about potassium chloride?
I am a little cautious about it.
Why is that?
Endorse it. I would rather you eat Mrs. Dash as a salt substitute. I would endorse that one. But more importantly, use lime and lemon, use ginger, garlic, use unsalted vinegar, use cilantro, use many other herbs to fill in for the loss of the salt. And potassium salt by itself, there's some back and forth about it. But I'm not here to substitute one bad thing to another maybe bad thing too. Okay. I'm not entirely sure about it. There is some data to support, yes, potassium salt may be okay, but I'm not here to endorse that. No. First of all, potassium salt tastes terrible. If you like potassium salt anyway, you might as well try Mrs. Dash, which is much healthier.
Yeah, and the problem with potassium chloride is potassium for those that have kidney disease or renal failure. Yeah. These are persons that may not, it may not be advantageous for them to use potassium chloride.
I'd rather you eat fruits and nuts which are high in potassium, and dates, and those are high in potassium, and they would reduce your blood pressure naturally, actually, instead of using a potassium salt.
So can a person unlearn their desire for salt?
Yes.
How do they do that?
Philadelphia produced this research, Philadelphia, and I wrote about it in my blogs under the title, Calling All Mothers and Grandmothers. Calling All Mothers and Grandmothers. So that's one of the earliest blogs I wrote based on the research from Philadelphia. So it turns out that grandmothers and aunties and aunts, whatever you call, these are the ones who are responsible for creating the salty taste in our mouth. If a child is raised without salty taste, he's not going to crave salty taste. They did this experiment in Philadelphia. It's a created
Please
taste.
don't blame the mothers for this. So
no, but not knowingly, obviously. But out of love, grandmothers and mothers express love to the children through this.
So you're saying babies don't come out craving salt?
No.
It's a learned, it's an acquired taste.
So one of the Indian Bollywood superstars just now came up with he wears this on his face. My baby's not asking for salt. You're the one asking for salt. You're the one making them eat salt. Babies never ask for salt. You're the one giving them salt and creating this taste. But it can be unlearned. It can be unlearned. That's a good thing about it. It's not like smoking that you're addicted, you cannot get over it, okay? So it takes as little as a weekend. Some people make 2 weeks, some people make 3 months. But on average is not that difficult to unlearn the salty taste. To a point.
You're saying in a couple of weeks, a person can learn not to crave the salty taste.
Yes, to a point. So we are salt-free in our house for 15 years now.
Wow.
No salt in our house, okay? And we just made a 10-course Thanksgiving meal, no salt, okay? So, but if somebody gave something salty, out of courtesy, I might take nibble a little bit of it, something like birthday cake, whatever. I might take a little bit of it. So my wife, if somebody gives him something salty, she'll instantly, reflexly, she'll spit it out.
Mm.
So I'll tell you a story, again, connect with Philadelphia. My younger brother used to live outside Philadelphia, okay? And I'm in Ohio. So a few years before COVID, he came to visit me with his two little kids, 5 and 7, for a long weekend. And my wife initially was making two preparations, one for us, one for them, because we don't know whether they like it or not. By next day or so, they're starting to eat our food. So she didn't have to make two
Mm.
separate preparations. Okay. So
Mm.
they spent a long weekend. So my brother called me with this story, and he drove them back to Philadelphia. On the way to Philadelphia, he thought his youngest son was deprived of his favorite foods. Okay. So he decided to go into a drive-through or whatever, uh, and bought him his favorite sandwich. Okay. The one he always orders. So this little boy, 5-year-old, took one bite of that sandwich. He says, "Oh my God, it's so salty," and spit it out.
Okay. Okay.
Within 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's consistent with that the most recent study that I saw that gave um, a group of middle-aged persons a high sodium diet and a low sodium diet. And these groups of people were those that had normal blood pressure, high blood pressure, uncontrolled blood pressure, undiagnosed high blood pressure. All of them were given a low sodium diet, and all of them showed a drop
Yes.
in their blood pressure.
Yes.
Even those that were on medication
Yes.
saw a drop in their blood pressure, and that was in 7 days.
Yes.
That's
Exactly.
pretty phenomenal.
Yes. There are a number of studies like that. One got published just now from University of Vanderbilt, published by American Heart Association. A crossover double-blind controlled study. This is all technical terms. But anyway, within 4 weeks, the drop in blood pressure in the low salt arm was so much that they could cut off one medication
Right.
in 4 weeks. So think about how profound that would be if all of us did that. So
there's hope. There's
yeah,
hope.
so we need people like you to join this mission. It's really very important. I'm very much interested in Black America rising up. One thing the Black America needs to rise up. I mean, there are so many political, social, so many other things that are going on. I was a member. I'm a life member of NAACP, by the way, and I served as health chair of state of Ohio NAACP, and I learned a lot of things that are affecting Black American, no doubt about it. But the biggest fight really is fighting this processing industry and restaurant industry. Stop killing us. Not that they don't know; they already know. They're they got blood in their hands. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yes. Yes.
When I see a 30-year-old, 25-year-old Black woman on dialysis, somebody's got blood in their hands.
Hmm.
So you kind of barely touched on that subject. 1/3 of all people on dialysis in America are Black Americans.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And many young ones. And many who supposed to be taking care of the little children. And you, as an OB-GYN, you would know, there's not enough perinatal care and whatever, and the blood pressure shoots up, and the kidneys never recover. They end up on dialysis. Tremendous tragedy for the mother and the children.
Right. So we need to make people aware, which is why I so appreciate you taking the time to make people aware, because I think we don't realize. And then there's a food industry that's not being held accountable.
Yes.
And we have a government that, I don't know, the FDA, we get these guidelines periodically. they don't seem to be for us. And so we have to assume responsibility. And if it is as simple as cutting back, can you cut back or do you need to eliminate?
Well, cutback is the process to eliminate. Eliminate is our final, the final objective, end goal. But any degree of cutting back has benefits. Uh,
Absolutely.
so, and as
Absolutely.
a pathway to you realize, oh, I didn't need to put that much salt. Then you keep cutting back. Uh,
There is so much more. We probably need to do a part two, but I promised you that this wouldn't go too long because there's the whole topic of being salt sensitive,
yes,
being salt resistant, and the
yes.
whole theory about why are so many Black people salt sensitive. And we could go on. We could go on. So I
So that
would like
this book
to.
describes that. And I would encourage you and your listeners to look at a 2-minute video that we created. 2-minute video. Anybody can spare 2 minutes. It comes up under Google or Yahoo or YouTube. You use 3 words: Salt Black America. 3 words: Salt Black America. You use 3 words in search. A video pops up with a hand like that and French fries. We create the video to explain exactly your questions. Why Black America is salt sensitive and what is the consequence of that
Yes,
in
yes.
2 minutes.
And there's a interesting debate about that. So I would like to ask you to consider, you don't have to say yes right now, but consider potentially coming back and having a continuation of this discussion.
Yes, ma'am. I would certainly would enjoy doing that. So I didn't get to share any of the data, but I spoke about it. Um, and, he, and you asked extremely pertinent questions. And we're going to delve into what happens to the arteries when you have high blood pressure, what happens to the kidneys when you have high blood pressure, what happens to the brain when you have high blood pressure. So we talked about a fight, the heart losing and getting bigger and failing, but what happens to the arteries in that fight? They get damaged. That's how you get heart attacks, strokes, and what's the pathway, how that happens. So we described that, and what happens after the heart becomes thick and it fails? What are all the things that
Yes,
go wrong?
yes,
Following that, so it's a cascade of events, one
yes,
thing leading to another,
yes.
ultimately leading to dementia. Dementia.
Dementia. Yeah.
Uh, ultimately in dementia. So all those pathways we have attempted to describe in simple ways, like the way we've been talking, and that is our project.
Okay. Well, Doctor, I look forward to having more conversation with you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Pleasure meeting, knowing you. And if I come to Philadelphia again, I'll look you up.
Please do. Please do. Take care. And
take
thanks
care.
again.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Goodbye. Yeah, I think we could have gone on and on and on. I
Yes.
felt like I was starting to take up too much of your time, but I mean, it's like this awful, awful situation that
Tragic. There's no other way to put it. I mean,
yeah,
people like you know, who see a good bit of it and experience probably in your own family.
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah.
Would have to
And people
step
think
up,
that
basically.
there's no harm. And yes, I can tell them don't use the salt, but I'm actually looking at the food industry and saying, don't put the salt,
Yeah.
and the government, like, you need to regulate this, and
Yeah.
it's
So we need at least a two-pronged approach. One, we need basic education. That's what we are trying to do.
absolutely.
Basic education. Why? Number two, we need legislative help,
Oh, we
legislative
do.
and executive help. Otherwise, the processing industry and restaurant industry has such deep pockets. They're so creative and they're
Yes.
so motivated, and they will find a way to. I mean, sea salt is a prime example.
That was such a great example. I said guilty, sea salt. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
A healthier choice. And I
Yes.
pay for it,
Yes.
I pay more for it. So yeah. All right.
All right, ma'am.
It was
Thank
a
you very much.
pleasure.
Take care, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.